Hi, my name is Phil Blancato. I am CEO and President of Latimer Thalman Asset Management, Chief Market Strategist for Rose. Welcome to another weekly market impact post Super Bowl. What a terrible game. I guess I like defense. I get it. I don't think New England Patriots deserve to be there. My opinion should have been the Buffalo Bills, should have been the Los Angeles Rams, but my opinion is completely irrelevant. For those who you may have won a Super Bowl box, congratulations. Funny story. My wife and I went to a Super Bowl party. So I paid $20 each, and the guy who runs is a good buddy of mine. He does everything. You bet on commercials, you bet on the boxes, all that fun stuff. Well, she wins $70 and refuses to give me back the money. Whoa, 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 whoa. At least I should get my $20 back. I didn't even get that back. Hopefully you all had a wonderful weekend and maybe you won a box or did something fun. Cold, New Jersey continues to be in the grips of we are in the Antarctica at this point. We have been below 20 degrees for the better part of the last 5 days. I've seen things I haven't seen in a long time. The Hudson River is almost completely frozen over. It's kind of a great story that for the ferries to get back and forth, they got to break the ice with these little tugboats to be able to get the ferries across the water. It's quite incredible. And even the canals down the Jersey Shore, which are salt water, this is the bay of the Jersey Shore, completely frozen over. We're playing hockey on it. The lakes by me, kids skating on them. I haven't seen that in I don't know how long. There's a river I cross on the way to New York City. That's a very wide river, and it's really kind of a brackish channel, which I've never seen frozen, completely frozen over. And this is a 300 wide river that's completely salt water. I can't believe the things I'm seeing. And you know what's funny? We've kind of gotten used to it. 10 degrees outside right now. It's just a normal day. At least the one thing about cold weather, it does get very dry. So as long as it's not humid out, you don't feel it as badly. Where my friend Harry today is going to join me in a minute. Is from Nashville, Tennessee. And when it's cold down there, oh boy, that's real cold. Why? Because it's that wet cold that goes right through you. I hate that kind of cold. But in any event, a wild week in markets last week. What I'm going to do for markets is I'll get back to markets at the end of today's podcast. I really want to get right to a very interesting podcast that we're doing today. You know, I love having guests on. So regardless of Super Bowl, by the way, Olympics, I'll talk Olympics later, but Olympics and Super Bowl and all the other things that are going on, you constantly hear the headlines of what's happening with AI, power, crypto, and all the things that are so unusual, so different. Just last week, a company called Anthropic kind of made the market turn upside down. And the reason why was they came out with a new suite of services that really threaten a lot of traditional businesses. Salesforce, for example, is a very strong data management, contact management company. They've been around forever. And their stock is ripped higher. Their CEO is a kind of, in my opinion, a bit of an egomaniac, but really interesting company. Well, with what Anthropic announced their new suite of services. Anthropic is a large language model like a Chat GPT. They are maybe going to be offer services that will allow you to fire any of these kind of contact management companies like a Salesforce. And the reason why I mention that is the disruption that could take place in the next, who knows how long, 3, 5 years, if not sooner, is profound. Great article this morning about how Amazon, through their using AI, through their involvement in data centers, through using the tax bill that was passed last year, which, I've talked a lot about this, that to me, when corporations pay less in taxes, they tend to spend that money on growth. So Amazon saved a ton of money by using the bill to immediately deduct new expenses, immediately reinvest that money into their company, and their profit margins are pushing up on 50% because of efficiencies they're getting on not just AI, but the benefit of the tax bill. Where this is going is we're in the middle of disruption. And I really thought having my friend Harry come on today, Harry Sudock, to talk a little bit about what his company CleanSpark is doing, and more importantly, some of these really fascinating topics. So Harry, welcome, buddy. How you doing?
Good to see you, Phil. I appreciate you having me on. I appreciate you waking up early on a Super Bowl Monday because the markets don't stop and neither do we.
Exactly. What'd you do yesterday for the Super Bowl? Anything fun?
I have a very pregnant wife,
Oh boy.
and so we're laying low. I made a big Sunday pasta, and
Whoa, whoa, wait a minute. Hold on, Harry. I want to know the details of the Sunday pasta here. That's a big deal.
all right. So traditionally we would do a red sauce, but we have a different craving profile in this house this year.
Okay. Okay.
So we did a garlic cream.
All right. All right. I mean, it's like you know how to cook.
We
Now,
did we did a chicken scarpariello with it
okay.
and a big garlic cream.
So now Sudoc doesn't scream Italian. Where did you get your taste for Italian food?
We have a I'm a New York Jew
Okay.
by breeding,
All
and
right.
so my in my opinion there are three cultures that cuisine is completely awash in New York: Chinese, Italian, and Jewish.
Yeah,
You
100%.
you could pick any lane of any ethnicity and you'll do a good job.
Without a doubt. So you don't know this about me, Harry. Harry and I we've known each other, but we not that well. Is I make 200 quarts of homemade tomato sauce every year, and I'm very involved in all types of cooking, but especially a good Sunday sauce. So
Of
that's
course,
awesome, Harry.
it's so good.
That's great. Good for you. How did you end up in Nashville, Tennessee?
Work. So I've been building data centers for the better part of 7 years, and one of the unsung heroes of the American infrastructure is the Tennessee Valley Authority.
Yeah.
And so we built our first data center in just about 50 minutes outside of Knoxville in early 2019 and started working with the TVA then, have never kind of stopped and it was too hard to be engaged in that relationship remotely. I lived in Manhattan for a number of years, but moved down to Nashville about 2.5 years ago to be closer to the TVA and to continue to run the business.
It's a great town. I do. I'm going down in a little bit. We have our annual women's event, the W.
Talk about taxes though. Incredible tax regime. Triple net in Tennessee. No dividend, no income, no capital gains.
And boy, would I like to leave New Jersey for that reason. Our new governor wants to crank up taxes. The mayor of New York with us.
Come on down, the water's warm.
I may just do that, but I do love Tennessee. I worked down there for a number of years. It was great. So tell me a little bit about what you do for CleanSpark and a little bit about the company. Because by the way, isn't one of the biggest data centers in the country now in your area too?
Yeah, it absolutely is. So we're a couple hours up the road from Elon's XAI Colossus campus. And Tennessee has a long history in nuclear, in hydroelectric, um, and really is well positioned both from a regulatory perspective as well as a power availability perspective to be one of the data center hubs that's emerging. Um, CleanSpark has really been through three phases of its business. We've been a public markets company for about 11 years, almost 12 years, and we've gone through three phases of growth. The first was as a microgrid and energy developer. The second was as a Bitcoin mining company, and we really used that Bitcoin mining heritage and that energy heritage as bootstrapping functions to bring us to today, where we're developing some of the most advanced AI compute campuses that exist today. So if you looked at a data center at any time, really up until 2 or 3 years ago, they would look very traditional, like your cloud-based or co-location locations. Today, the AI factory, which is a term that Jensen uses and one that we subscribe to, it's really about throughput, where you're turning an electron into an AI token. All of these large language models are run on these tokens, and that's the unit of account, for lack of a better term, for how AI intelligence gets generated. And so we're in the business of creating the fastest speed to market, the lowest total cost of ownership, and the lowest, watts per token created environment for this type of compute on behalf of large scale customers.
So the reason why I wanted Harry and CleanSpark on, by the way, they're a publicly traded firm. I'm not recommending stocks so my compliance folks don't kill themselves, but they're doing something really unique out there. And we can talk about your symbol later. If someone wants to look it up and do their own research, that's great. And what I like about the uniqueness is the transition of their company and where they began. So why don't we start with something simple? Maybe a little bit about what Bitcoin mining is, and then let's go on to the other phases of your business, even though I know it's not what you guys do anymore. But I think we've talked a lot about Bitcoin, and I'm very fascinated by stable coins. Maybe a little bit about, for the average person to understand who doesn't, what is a Bitcoin miner, what is a stable coin, without, and then we'll transfer over to what's happening with energy, and then we'll get into data centers a little bit.
Yeah, I love all of those topics, and I think that I think that Bitcoin mining is really some of the strongest heritage you can have for building AI compute because it's the place to cut your teeth and build your business in the way where the incentives are very properly understood. The way that Bitcoin mining works is that you source electricity, you build a data center, and each unit of energy is converted into a unit of compute on behalf of the Bitcoin security model. And then each one of those units of compute is revenue positive because you're selling your compute to a decentralized network like the Bitcoin blockchain. And so there's a very, very direct relationship between energy, compute, and revenue. And what that's allowed us to do is to just become a very large scale purchaser of energy. And that's really the fundamental baseline unit that we think about. So if you rewound the clock to late 2020, when we mined our first Bitcoin, we were actually brought to an Atlanta data center as a vendor originally. And they wanted to harden their deployment with a microgrid attached to their data center. We went on that sales call and we walked out of that sales call acquiring the prospective buyer. So we bought that data center. We put our first units of Bitcoin compute into that data center environment, and that began a very aggressive expansion period for the company, where we not only expanded, our revenue and our Bitcoin mining, but really we expanded our portfolio of power contracts and land. And so where we sit today is with 1.8 gigawatts of power under contract. That's a
That's what,
huge,
500,000 homes, something like that.
more than a million homes.
Oh, okay.
Well more than a million homes. And and that type of portfolio acquisition and the re-rating that's happened for available grid connected power, when you look at our balance sheet, that doesn't show up in the same way that, cash and cash equivalents would or
Right,
PP&E
right.
would show
Because
up.
you need, without the power, you can't mine a Bitcoin or turn on a data center.
Exactly. And so it becomes this really interesting asset that doesn't get captured in the accounting, but is tremendously valuable on a standalone basis. And what we've been able to do with acquiring that power on differentiated terms and structures has been part of what you talked about my day to day, having that energy access and that type of deal structuring. It's something that I'm passionate about and that I've had the great opportunity to lead some of our initiatives around. Um, but this is really the engineering rigor and this other piece of our business, which is how do you orchestrate the data center environment on top of the land, on top of the power contract, such that you're able to be a differentiated producer? Because what we're seeing, you talked about it in the intro a little bit. Why are SaaS companies selling off and AI companies rising? It's really a function of durability of cash flow. And so the thought was for a long time, and I think this was correct, is that the durability of SaaS cash flows were better than
I mean,
AAA.
SaaS, everybody's software companies that use
Yeah,
AI to develop
e-
things. Sorry, go ahead.
Absolutely. SaaS stands for software as a service. Typically, that business model means that you're paying per seat. Each employee needs to have a suite of software tools to enable them to do their job. And the durability of those revenues was thought to be stronger than AAA credit, right? A company will default on its debt before it'll let its employees go unproductive. And what AI is doing is it's signaling to the market that maybe those revenues are less durable. And I don't think software is going away by any stretch, but maybe a 35 times earnings is the wrong number. Maybe it should be 20 or 10. And those are the types of market digestion points that we're seeing happen in front of us. And where those revenues and efficiencies are going, they're going to two places. One, they're going to make companies more profitable, exactly like the Amazon example that you use. Productivity is going up because of AI.
Yep. 5%
And
increase in the fourth quarter of last year alone. That's an incredible
it,
number.
it, it one of the metrics I look at that I think is super indicative is that there's a company called GitHub, which manages the code base of a lot of these technology companies. The percentage of GitHub commits, so new code written by AI, went from 2% of total GitHub commits to 4% over a very short period of time. So it doubled. And what that says is that the amount of software being created by AI, therefore with a lower cost basis and lower cost structure,
Mm.
that number is going up very rapidly. That's a clear indication of the productivity gains that these companies are going to be enjoying and their shareholders are going to be enjoying. Now, the inverse to that is that if you don't have a company that is exposed to these productivity gains, you're going to be a laggard in a market that's re-rating around a new technology.
Yeah, and it's funny because as we go through this kind of moth to a butterfly moment, I think all of us are a little concerned about what does it mean for me. So I think most of the people on this thing probably don't understand how do you actually mine a Bitcoin? I'm curious. In 30 seconds left, how do you mine a Bitcoin? Maybe we'll start there.
It is purely a function of compute. So
But you go around
think
the world looking for little fragments of code and put them together. I mean, how to what you flip? I want to go find. And I know this is impossible. I want to go find a coin today. How would you? What would you do?
one is you would need a lot of energy and a lot of servers.
Yeah.
So
And
the
explain why that is. You got to search the whole world for these
ex-
pieces of code, right?
exactly. So think of every 10 minutes on average, there's a new Bitcoin block found. And I
Really,
say
it's still that frequent. I didn't think it was that frequent anymore.
the
Okay.
code is designed to be self-healing to keep that 10-minute interval going.
Is this
And
supposed to run
so
out at 25 million coins? I believe that's the last coin.
21 million is the last coin,
And how
and
many have
that
found so far?
about 20 million.
Wow. So we're at the end of it.
We're at the end of it. But what's really interesting is that the way that the Bitcoin monetary policy functions is every 4 years, about the amount of new Bitcoin created, minted per block gets cut in half. And so if you looked at the first Bitcoin block, there were 50 brand new Bitcoin in that block. Then 4 years later, there were 25 Bitcoin every block. And what's great is that the way the monetary policy works is that for those first 4 years, 50% of the circulating supply was discovered. Then the next 4 years, 25%, then 12.5%, then six and a quarter. Then right now where we're at is three and an eighth. So there's three and an eighth new Bitcoin minted every 10 minutes. And what we at CleanSpark do is we represent about 5% of the total computing power on the entire Bitcoin network. And so 5 out of every 100 Bitcoin mined are ours.
Wow. Okay.
And
And
the
that's sort of free. You got to pay for the power, but once you own the coin, you own the coin, right?
you own and we've been able to accumulate over 13,000 Bitcoin on our balance sheet. And
That's a lot.
what yeah, it's just north of a billion depending on today's price. Um, what's unique about the way that we do it is that we have an institutional trading desk internally. We're using derivative strategies and overlays to monetize that as a capital asset. We've got $400 million worth of Bitcoin-backed lines of credit available to us to be able to really use Bitcoin as a corporate capital asset. And it lets us minimize dilution. It lets us be very tactical with our accretive acquisitions. And so, what we've endeavored to do is to build a business that has this Bitcoin treasury function, enabling our growth and our transition to AI infrastructure.
All right, so let's switch gears. I think that the folks got that. But then there's power. So you guys own a lot of power. And I think the average person out there is worried about their electrical bill being up 18% in the last month in New Jersey. Is this because of Bitcoin mining? Is it because of data center demand? And if it is, where are we going to get more power? Because right now, there's really real. It sounds like you guys have evolved away from this a bit. Tell me about where you're getting power now. What you think the future power is?
So the reason that people's power bills go up is because of bad policy. It is not because of industrial use, frankly.
Wow.
Um,
Okay, that's a bold
if you
statement.
if you look at I'll pick on New York as an example because they made it easy. They turned off Indian Point,
Yeah. Yeah, they did.
and everybody's power bills went up a lot because Indian Point and nuclear power is low cost, stable baseload.
Yeah.
It was running on an asset that was fully depreciated, it was paid for, and it was still functioning properly. And what we're seeing in other places is that nuclear assets are getting their useful life extended.
3 Mile Island. You know, you and I were kids when that thing shut down, and they're finally trying to turn it back on.
Exactly. So the worst thing we could do is shutter existing good assets. If you go back 25, 30 years ago, there were 130 nuclear reactors in the US. Today, I think there's 98 or 99
I just was
operating.
at an event where I'm going to have them on the podcast where modular nuclear reactors and how quickly they can be built, and what the interesting thing about them is fit in a container and have them anywhere in the world in a very short amount of time.
It's one of the places that our industrial base really is primed to thrive if we have the will to win. But I try to break the world down into what's a physics problem and what's an engineering problem. And nuclear energy is not a physics problem. It's solved.
Yeah, yeah.
It's purely a policy question and an engineering question, a supply chain question. We know they work. They've been working for 70 years, and all we need to do is get our head out of the sand and build more of them.
If you took all the nuclear waste that's ever been generated in the world, you would fill up the end zone of a football field
E-
about 4 inches deep.
ex-
It's
it's
nothing.
not a real problem.
And the new
More.
reactors can actually use some of the spent fuel for other things, which is critical.
There's a great company that I follow closely because I'm such a nerd about this stuff. It's ASPI, not a recommendation. But what they're doing is they're creating one the fuel the fuel the HALEU fuel that nuclear reactors use, but they're also engaged in all of these medical isotopes and all of these half-life degradations for all these other use cases because these radioactive materials have a tremendous range of application, and the manufacturing process for fuel looks like a lot of the manufacturing processes for these other use cases. So I think, and one of the themes that I think we're talking about under the surface here in a number of different areas is that the world of atoms is having a big comeback
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
these days. And so the ability to have a real asset associated with a business activity was, poo-pooed for about the last 25 years while software ate the world.
yeah.
And today, atoms, we're going to make atoms great again.
So well, then you all need power. Where do you get it from today? Can you get more? Are you being capped because of the cost, the rising cost of energy? I mean, there's some public pushback. I don't want to. There was a great article last week in the Journal about how the data
100%.
center is going to be built out in Indiana, I believe, and they're trying to shut it down because they don't want to see the power go away, or these buildings they're not very pretty, and there's all this stuff and all this what it does for my local environment. What are your thoughts on that?
One is we as data center developers need to do a better job educating. I think that there's a lot of fear, and some of it is well substantiated, and some of it is a lack of education. And the burden is on the business to do the education in the community. We have a long track record of being very education forward in the communities where we go operate. We our largest footprint today is in Georgia, and we've
Got my
invested.
bulldogs. What I got my bulldog out there. I got two daughters at the University of Georgia.
Go dogs, baby, but don't
Oh,
tell my friends in Knoxville that I said that.
I won't tell. Don't worry. I get it. But passion runs deep at Rocky Top. I get it.
We have tough knockdown dragouts on Saturdays.
Yeah.
Um, but this has been a lot of what we take an approach that we call the front door approach. We want to go in, we want to tell the community exactly what we're going to do. We want to tell them why it's going to be a benefit to them. And we want them to go in eyes wide open to what we're intending to build and to do. I'll use an example, where our current largest operating site is today in Sandersville, Georgia. We have a lot of connectivity with the current mayor, but he's been in a number of public official roles over the last 44 years. They had a budget deficit for 42 of those 44 years. They happened to be the 42 before we showed up. The last 2 years, they have a budget surplus, a significant budget surplus. And one of the conversations they're having as a city is about buying down property taxes with that surplus
Wow.
because they don't, at the end of the day, we pay sales, we pay sales tax on the power. The city is also the utility, it's a municipal utility. And so we pay a margin to the city with every kilowatt hour that we buy. And so those dollars stay in the community, not to mention the jobs. It's a 15,000 person city. And
15.
so
Oh, that's a great point. What do you think their average hourly wage is for those 15,000? You had to guess. Or what do
Uh,
they make per year? But yeah, what a generalization.
Low to mid $50,000 range.
In that area of the country, that's a pretty good salary.
100%. And so, but let's say that you were able to deliver a 1 or a 2% reduction in property taxes.
That's a big deal.
That's a big deal for
Yeah.
that community. And so, the other one that we hear a lot about is
Can I
water.
interrupt 1 second? Do me a
Yeah,
favor. What explain for a minute what is a data center? Maybe that
absolutely.
let's start there.
So think of a data center basically as a manufacturing facility for the digital world. It looks like a manufacturing facility. You look at that big kind of warehouse
It's a big ugly
footprint.
box, a warehouse
It's
looking thing, kind of
a
right.
warehouse looking thing, but inside, instead of assembly lines, are halls of servers. And
So in
so
this sense, where there's so much concern about losing jobs to AI, in your sense, you're adding jobs for AI, which is something I talk a lot about the infrastructure. Now, are these jobs going to
100%.
be on the build and then walk away, or are they continuing jobs?
These are facilities that require real upkeep. There's networking needs, there's electrical needs, there's groundskeeping, there's security. There's a real significant number of jobs. If you look at an industry average, our Sandersville facility is 250 megawatts of power. When you
200.
get
Wow.
when you get into the data center, that's probably somewhere between 100 and 200 jobs.
Yeah.
And so for a city of 15,000 people, having an
It's a big
employer
deal.
of that size is a big deal.
Yeah.
Um, the other one that we hear a lot about, so we hear about the curb appeal. We're working with the architects to make sure that it's at least inoffensive, if not beautiful.
Yeah.
The next one we hear about is the power, and I think that we've got a number of solutions to that. The first of which is that every electron that gets sold into a data center has benefit, especially in a place like Sandersville, Georgia, has benefit to the community because the city is the owner of that utility.
Right.
And then the third one we hear a lot about is water
Yeah.
and the water use. And to be clear, data centers are very large users of water. The part that they
Keep
don't
things
tell
cool, right?
you
They got to keep things cool using water.
exactly. And the metro, we went out and we spent the day with NVIDIA going to data center class and understand how the NVIDIA architecture and technology is being designed into the future. And they said, well, one of these racks or these data halls is going to use an Olympic swimming pool's worth of water every day. And I'm like, oh my goodness, that's a lot of water. The The part they don't tell you is that that's a closed loop system. So it uses the same Olympic swimming pool's worth of water every day. And so it's circulating through a closed loop system. So once it's stood up, that water gets used and reused and reused and reused. There's a small amount of evaporation that you've got to top up a little bit, but it's not this type of massive consumer of water once the system is stood up and operating.
So that's a one-time event with the water, not. I'm sure there's still some need here and there, but it's not a continuing event in that sense.
Exactly, exactly. So you hear these statistics that you're going to use as much water as the Hoover Dam, which it may, but only a very small fraction of that many, 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 many times.
That's interesting because that one of the big knocks that we keep hearing is exactly to your point that we have this issue with water, and I always thought it was a closed system, so that's helpful for the average person out there that's listening to this. And I say average, excuse me, the person who doesn't know what this stuff means. Why is well, maybe we transition here a little bit. You need a data center to power AI. You guys are moving into this AI world. If you had the the person out there who's worried about jobs, worried about the power in their home, what's the other side of the story, in your opinion, for the person that is worried about the future and what it means for these things?
What I would say is that, we've been on a very fast technology roller coaster for the last 40 years. And this is going to just be the next stage in that. If you rewound the clock 20 years, none of us have iPhones. If you rewound the clock 30 years, none of us have email. If you
Yeah.
rewound the clock 40 years, none of us have internet.
I started 35 years ago. There was no email, no computers, no phones, no laptops, none of that. And now look, we're talking live on a camera.
And you know what the best investment over that period of time was? The S&P 500.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, I'll quote our friend Warren Buffett and say, never bet against the American economy.
Yeah. When it comes to AI, what is your company doing with it now? I mean, there's so many players in this space. We're worried about stock market valuations. The software guys got pounded, but Nvidia trading at, depending on how you look, 1 year forward, 1 year back at 25, 35 times earnings, but they got 30% profit. You all as a company, very interesting profit profile. Not recommending it, just thinking what you're doing is really cool stuff. And we as a firm have an investment banking relationship with you guys,
Mhm.
and it's because of your success that we want to partner with you. What do you think is the next phase of AI, and what's your company doing in it?
Yeah, I think that, we're approaching it very much the way that folks approach the gold rush, which is the best business to be in during the California gold rush was the picks and the shovels.
Yeah, selling the picks and shovels. Yeah.
And so that's really how we're approaching it. We're great at power. We're great at the infrastructure engineering and
How do you be
development,
great at power if you don't make power?
sourcing it on a differentiated basis. And
Yeah.
we don't make it today, but we're open to making it in the future. And that's one of our solutions to this power constraint and this piece of the pushback is, at the end of the day, these data centers are so important to be brought to market. If all we can do to keep growing is to bring our own power development, we're going to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so I think that it's a bricks and sticks kind of approach to this piece of the sector. We're using the AI tools internally. It's a great tool set to be able to add to any team. But ultimately,
You
we
just said
want
something important.
to.
Tool set. I'd argue AI is a tool to make us more efficient. It's not a tool to eliminate us or eliminate jobs necessarily. Sure, there'll be some breakage. And so I talk about Flippy the Fryer, a robotic arm that is in White Castle. Back to your when you grew up here, when people go at 1 o'clock in the morning for a bad cheeseburger, but the arm fries French fries is an AI arm because you can't get a person to fry them at 1 o'clock in the morning, and it saved them 200,000 man hours last year. That's to me, it's a tool to make White Castle more efficient, better French fries, more productivity. But it's not going to be, I don't think, this job killer. Maybe it's the first rung of the labor force, but not the other. You talked about all these new jobs that were added because of it. That to me is the story. What do you think?
I totally agree. I look at it. I'm a caveman sometimes. My caveman example is the ATM. Bank tellers were terrified of the ATM. Today, there are more bank tellers than there were when the ATM got launched.
That's a
Why?
great example.
Because more bank branches could open. And
Yeah,
so maybe there's not 10 bank tellers per location. Maybe now there's five, but there's triple the locations. And so that headcount went up because really we were underserved as customers for banks because we needed more branches. And the ATM made more branches possible. Each of those branches had fewer bank tellers, but there were more locations, and so the gross number of those jobs went up. And I think AI is going to be a similar story. I think that the service economy and the products that are available to us as consumers is artificially low because the other example I love is you go back to starting a startup in the early 2000s, you needed to raise $50 million for your RAID servers and all the bare metal that you needed to spin it up. That was before Amazon Web Services existed.
yeah.
And so Amazon Web Services launches, the number of data center jobs went down, but the number of startups went massively up because you were able to buy the infrastructure required to start your company.
More
Um,
startups happened in the United States last year than ever in American history.
exactly. And so to me, this is an efficiency goes up, headcount per company goes down, but number of companies goes massively up, and we end up, being beneficiaries as consumers and shareholders over time.
Let's go around the horn. A couple final thoughts before we wrap it up today. But I'm curious. I'll start with Bitcoin. I want to two questions there, and then we'll go to data, and then we'll go to power or AI. So why this sell-off in Bitcoin? To me, I know for me, I talk a lot about it. I think it's got a relationship with interest rates and tech stocks. And in a risk-off moment, Bitcoin sells off. I don't think it ever becomes a currency, but it's a great way to communicate and certainly transfer assets amongst companies. But your thoughts?
My thoughts about Bitcoin is that we're in the early innings, and Bitcoin, the teenager, is going to look like a risk asset. Bitcoin, the adult, is going to look much more like a treasury asset.
Yeah,
And so we're still in our teenager phase with this. I think that the rise in precious metals was very challenging for the thesis around Bitcoin because I think people were expecting if gold and silver are going to go up 300%. Bitcoin should as well because it's bucketed with those assets. It didn't. So I think there was some thesis break. I think there was some macro. And I think that when correlation goes to one, Bitcoin sells off with the rest of the market.
Perfectly said. Better than I said. Excellent. Then we'll switch to data centers. What do you, I mean, we hear so much about this. I think the biggest one in the country is being built in Louisiana. It's going to be a mile long or something like this. The numbers are mind-boggling. You take the rest of the world's data centers, roll them up, we're double the rest of the world, using maybe 10 to 12% of the American power grid by the end of this decade. What do you think? There's this, do we run out of power because we're so dependent on powering up data centers, and are we gonna have to shut them down on a hot day so people don't lose power in their home? Or if you had to comment on data centers and their future, what would you tell folks about it?
I'll use my caveman example again. Right now, about 10% of the American electric system in the summer is used for air conditioning. Think of all the productivity gains that we get from air conditioning. You imagine going into the office and air conditioning doesn't work and it's August 8th and the dog days are here. You're not getting anything done. I think of data centers the exact same kind of way, that they're just going to be a requirement for productivity. And so they become a non-negotiable. And at the end of the day, constraint breeds creativity. And we are going to figure out ways to generate more power. The consumer is not going to tolerate their prices going up. So we're going to have to figure out a way to build hundreds and hundreds of megawatts and gigawatts of power without impacting the consumer. And so that means that the burden's going to get passed back to the data center developer. And they're going to do it because that's a very heavily positive ROI decision to build the next generation of American generation.
We need more power. We're going to tear down the grids, build more power. The Georgia nuclear power plant, while massively overbuilt, over budget, excuse me, it still represents finally a nuclear power plant. But I don't think we need to be those mega plants anymore. You can get uranium out of salt water. I mean, we don't have to
Hmm.
strip mine anymore. So I completely agree with Harry. The jobs that'll be created and the need for power going forward fix this job problem. In fact, I'd argue take it differently. Not only get generational wealth transfer from older folks dying, we get wages that are pushing well up about $80,000 per person in many parts of the country, to where the average salary in the United States gets to 100 grand a year, and by the end of this decade, I think, and it fixes a lot of this kind of K-shaped economy that we're in. And especially, maybe power gets cheaper. What if on the other side of this we get cheaper power, which I think is a possibility.
I think is a high possibility.
So that's pretty interesting. Last one, Harry, and then we'll just wrap it up with some fun stuff. So AI, what I just talked about, I just read over the weekend how Spotify, there's two songs on the top 50 Spotify list that are fake. So some people see that and they get really scared. In your opinion, how should people wrap their head around AI, and what's your company doing in that space? Maybe that would be a good tie together.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, the same type of commentary was happening when we went from vinyl and CD to MP3. MP3 is not real music, it's just digital music.
Yeah.
This is the same type of thing. We've been through challenging transitions before and we're better for it. And so we're going to see the same type of thing happen now. I think that, the best advice I have for for AI is use it. Just just fire it up, use it, try things, watch YouTube videos of other people using it. The same way that if, when I get a flat tire, I look at YouTube because there's somebody who made a video about my make and model about how to put the donut on. I use YouTube and tutorials exactly the same way for AI. I have never written a line of code before in my life. I'm not about to start now, but I am willing to work with an AI that's going to help me do that, and it's going to do it for me, and then it's going to make my job easier and more productive, even if it's something as simple as, hey, go through my email and flag every email that you think I should respond to. And then I'll give it feedback and say, well, I didn't like these ones. These ones were spam or these ones were advertisements. I don't want to respond to those. Please refine your search. Then it refines it. And so, you know what I'm doing? I'm saving 11 minutes going through my inbox. That's just an easy, very clear example of I'm saving time. It's doing the initial work for me. Then the next layer is, okay, I don't want you to just flag the ones I need to respond to. I want you to write draft responses the way that you've seen me respond to emails before. Now I've got drafts
Yeah.
for every one of those emails. It's those little things that make some of the mundane pieces of the day a little more efficient, a little more easy. Those are the places where I'm using AI right now.
And I just think where we're going with healthcare and the rapid change we'll get to get better healthcare, better ultimate decisions is where most people are going to feel the impact. I think that's pretty powerful.
100%.
Final thoughts. I want you to stick around, but final thoughts before anything you want to leave the folks with about your company. By the way, symbol CLSK, Charlie, Larry, Sam, Kappa, right? Not recommending it again, everybody, but I think it's a very interesting company, smaller company, but I think it's doing some really cool things. So, what final thoughts for everybody, Harry? Again, thank you for joining me today. It's been a lot of fun.
No, Phil, thank you for having me. I think, my final thoughts are when I've had success professionally or in markets, it's because I've been an optimist. And this is another example where, optimism pays better. And so and so I try to bring that to everything that I do. We as a company, we are very culture forward, very people focused. It's the joke is that you have to, you get into these high, heavy capex, asset heavy type of business models to figure out that it was always about people all along. And it's something that, that we wear on our sleeves. We are proud to be a company operating in Georgia and Tennessee and Mississippi and Wyoming and Nevada. Like those are the places that make us excited and where we love to spend time. It's not about, kind of the and all due respect to New Jersey, but coastal elite kind of company. It's really it's a blue collar business at its heart. It's about linemen, it's about earthwork, it's about the trades. And so that's what keeps us grounded. Our internal view is that the best way to run the business is with our head in the clouds, but our feet in the dirt. And so that type of approach, keeps us grounded and keeps us excited about the future.
Cool. Very, very cool. Well, let me just hit on the U.S. economy for a minute, then Harry, I want your shout out of the week. When I get a lot of questions about why this sell-off and why the market's been so volatile. There's two reasons that drive volatility. One, when you get stocks trading at prices that don't make a lot of sense, or you get disruption that Harry and I have hit on a lot in this call, it creates volatility. That's all last week was. And even at that, the surprising day on Friday, it goes back to this rotation trade that I talked to you about. And I get this question a lot too. Do I think there's a sell-off coming this year? Absolutely. Seeing the market go down 10% is normal, and that's why I think it's coming. Not because of some breakage, but a shift from software companies to hardware companies. Just think about Salesforce to Micron, or you just think about Caterpillar being an AI company today and less of an agriculture. Those shifts are creating market opportunities. But I want to make this clear. Why I was bullish on the economy this year, there's three driving factors that I don't want you to think about. The first one is AI. We hit on it this morning. And that data center spending, AI spending, and energy production, not to mention productivity gains, are bullish for the U.S. economy. The second one is an industrial renaissance happening with semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, defense. I talked about the Amazon situation. The bill is allowing companies to spend in America. And that spending is going to happen. And you're seeing money spent in areas of growth: pharmaceuticals, defense, semiconductors, data centers, and so on. And last one, the bill does allow what everybody got a tax break on January 1st. So lower household taxes, probably to the tune of, depending on how much you make, 1,500 to 2,000 bucks right out of the gates and where you spend your money. The second one, that 100% immediate deduction of money you're spending to build your company, and ultimately infrastructure spending and defense spending is going to create a big, powerful lift. So what does it mean for U.S. economy? Well, we grew at 4% in the third quarter, 4.4. We probably grew at 4 or 5 in the fourth. If we continue above 4% growth rates, guess what? The debt problem that we talked so much about on this call might just get resolved because we're growing at a GDP rate that creates enough revenue that suddenly our debt to GDP ratio goes back below. For every dollar we make, we spend less money. That's a gigantic moment for American history. And in this kind of sort of experiment that we're in, whether it's what Harry's company's doing and its opportunities to the U.S. economy grow with ebbs and flows, I think it's an exciting time. I really am very excited about where we're at. All right, Harry, shout out of the week. I'll pass it on. If you don't have one, that's fine. I have mine for this week. Anybody you want to give a highlight to you think is doing extraordinary things?
I think that the highlight of the week goes to, well, I've got lots of family ones because
That's okay. You're allowed to do that. That's fine.
they're all
Your wife is
carrying.
pregnant, right? So we give her one. That's a big deal.
She gets about 10 every
Yeah.
day.
I love it.
Um, but I think beyond that, I think that what Amazon launched last night on the Super Bowl was awesome with how they're using their deployed doorbell system to find lost dogs is an incredible it's just an
Yeah.
incredible project. But the other one and this one, hits me right where I am. These Trump accounts for every kid that's born to be
Yeah.
an owner of the US economy, I think it's just profound. And my hope is that we can extend that type of thinking to Social Security. You talk about the debt problem that we face. If every dollar in Social Security was put into the market,
We
we
wouldn't
would
have a
have
problem.
we wouldn't have a problem.
Yeah.
And so I think that not only on the tax side are good things happening, but also, I think about it, every balance sheet has two sides to the ledger. I think we're going to be working on the liability side with growth, exactly the way that you described it. But I think working on the asset side as well and investing intelligently, on behalf of every single American, that's something that we haven't seen certainly in my lifetime, and it's one of the things that I'm most excited about.
No, I agree. Pro growth, optimism. I love it. I didn't even give a market update, by the way. Just so everybody, the market was basically flat on the S&P last week. The rotation's on. The Dow up 2.5%, 50,000. When I started my career, Dow 10,000 was a big deal. Now we're Dow 50,000. Growth stocks down 195 last week. Value stocks up 219. I talked a lot about small caps. They're crushing it on the year of 7.64. This rotation to other areas because of what AI is doing for productivity is happening in living color. I hope you're willing to take advantage of it. Just don't own the Mag 7 anymore. You don't need to. There's other areas to make money. Heck, bonds are up half of 1% on the year. That's a good, nice number. And international stocks, which are finally benefiting from some of this, at 576. So, not much of an old market update. I'll skip that. My shout out of the week. I love Harry's. They were great. I'm going to give it to the Olympians this week. These kids that kill themselves all year long. Lindsey Vonn, what a terrible story. That great comeback story. But that's the beauty of sport, right? But for these kids and these athletes that have committed themselves to going out there, and I know some chatter about who said what, forget it. They have the right to their own opinion. Leave that nonsense aside. My point is to go out there when that young lady, Breezy, who won the gold medal, there she's standing on a podium, crying her eyes out, win the gold medal in the downhill. To me, those are the people that deserve our applause this week and our support. Being an Olympian is a big deal, big commitment. And I hope all of them do well, but especially those American kids. Can't wait for the hockey games. Those are going to be fun. But my shout out this week goes to the Olympics. Harry, thank you for joining me this week, buddy. This was great.
Awesome, Phil. Really, really appreciate it.
Good luck with your family. It's super exciting. Everybody else, thank you very much. I'm headed down to our big W Forum event. I'll talk about that next week. And have a wonderful week, everybody. Stay warm. It's going to warm up in New Jersey. We might break 32 this week. That's exciting times. Melt some of this damn snow. Take care, everybody. Have a wonderful week. Bye bye.